I give them my highest recommendation for your consideration. Once again, it's nice to be with you, and I look forward to the opportunity to visit with you all in person in your office someday soon.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, not only for the introduction, but for your distinguished service to the nation. And now it is another pleasure to be able to recognize former Deputy Secretary of Defense Bob Work to introduce Ms. Blume. Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Inhofe, and distinguished members of the committee. It is always an absolute honor to appear before the SASC, but today I am doubly honored to introduce to you and enthusiastically commend and endorse the Biden administration's nomination to be the Pentagon's next director of the Office of Cost Assessment and Program Evaluation, Ms. Susanna B. Blume. Now, as you all know, Congress created CAPE, as well as the position of director, in the Weapons System Acquisition Reform Act of 2009. It assigned CAPE the mission to provide the Secretary and the Department with timely, insightful, and unbiased analysis on resource allocation and cost estimation problems. CAPE's ultimate role is to deliver the optimal portfolio of Department of Defense military capabilities through the most efficient and effective use of each taxpayer dollar. And in my judgment, there is absolutely no one more qualified to fill this vital role than Susanna Blume. I first met Susanna when I was the Undersecretary of the Navy in the first Obama administration. As part of the Defense Policy Review Initiative, at that time the department was in delicate negotiations with the government of Japan, as well as the governor of Guam, to move Marines off of Okinawa to Guam. The DPRI was extraordinarily sensitive and expensive. Then Chairman Carl Levin and late Ranking Member John McCain took a personal interest in these negotiations and were, as shall I say, quite energetic in their oversight. My backside still has the calluses to prove it. At the time, Ms. Blume worked for now Deputy Secretary of Defense Kathleen Hicks, who oversaw the DPRI for the Undersecretary for Policy, who coordinated action between OSD and the Department of the Navy. Susanna impressed me from the first moment I saw her in action. It was obvious she was an absolute superb analyst. She came to meetings armed with facts and figures, and she was determined to get the move of Marines from Okinawa to Guam right. She had an absolute knack for working from high-level strategy through operational alternatives to the discrete budget details. She was cool, confident, articulate, and I have to say, she utterly laid waste to anyone who came to meetings unprepared. As a Marine, I recognized and admired her warrior spirit, and I vowed to myself to steal her from policy and get her on my staff as soon as I possibly could. As it turned out, I ultimately succeeded in getting her on my staff, but it wasn't until I became the Deputy Secretary of Defense and the Undersecretary for Policy could no longer fight me off. Now, I knew exactly where Susanna's talents would best fit on my staff, and I made her my Deputy Chief of Staff with program and plans. As such, for 3 years, she worked with CAPE to help shape the defense program envisioned first by Secretary Chuck Hagel, then Secretary Ash Carter, and finally Secretary James Mattis. She oversaw and managed the Deputies Management Action Group, or DMAG, the organization that made all final program recommendations to the Secretary of Defense. By the time I left the department, there were few people who understood better the confluence of strategy, program, and budget than Susanna Blume. Susanna herself left government service and joined the Center for a New American Security in August of 2017. There, she quickly rose to the position of Director of the Center's Defense Program. In this role, she authored reports on the link between strategy and resources, the optimization of the DoD program for great power competition, and how to make the planning, programming, budgeting, and execution process work better. When I heard that President Biden had nominated her to be director of CAPE, I was not surprised. She was literally made for the role. Now, before I close, there's one last thing I would like to note. Everyone knows the director of CAPE needs to be a hardcore analyst. Not everyone comprehends the director's heavy responsibility for independent cost estimates, upon which the fate of programs often hinge. Those who disagree with the ICE, be they program managers, members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, service chiefs and secretaries, and even members of Congress and their staffs, exert pressure on the director to modify it. Directors therefore have to have the moral courage to stand their ground and speak truth to power. And Susanna has moral courage to spare. She is not one to bend in a strong breeze. You can all be assured she will always say what she means and mean what she says. Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Inhofe, distinguished members of the committee, I urge you to confirm Ms. Blume as the director of CAPE. You simply will never find a more dedicated, talented, and capable candidate. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for affording me the privilege of introducing this remarkable lady to you.
Well, thank you very much, Secretary of Work, and not only for your introduction, but also for your extraordinary service to the nation. Since a quorum is now present, before I introduce the witnesses, I ask the committee to consider one civilian nomination and a list of 3,438 pending military nominations. First, I ask the committee to consider the nomination of the Honorable Christine E. Wormuth to be Secretary of the Army. Is there a motion to favorably report Ms. Wormuth's nomination to the Senate? Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
The ayes have it. The motion carries. Finally, I ask the committee to consider a list of 3,438 pending military nominations. Included in this list is the nomination of General Paul J. LaCamera, U.S. Army, to be Commander, United Nations Command, Combined Forces Command, and United States Forces Career. Of these nominations, one nomination is 1 day short of the committee's requirement that nominations be in committee for 7 days before we report them out. No objection has been raised to this nomination, and I recommend the committee waive the 7-day rule in order to permit the confirmation of the nomination of this officer before the Senate recesses for the Memorial Day recess. Is there a motion to favorably report this list of 3,438 pending military nominations to the Senate? Is there a second? All in favor, say aye, please.
Aye. Aye.
The motion carries. Thank you very much. Does anyone wish to comment, or Senator Kramer, do you have a comment?
I do, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I would just like to be recorded as abstaining on the Wormuth nomination.
So moved. Your abstention will be noted in the record. Thank you, Senator Kramer. And now let me call on Mr. Kendall for his opening statement.
Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Inhofe, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today as a nominee to be Secretary of the Department of the Air Force. I'm honored and humbled to have this opportunity. I'd like to thank President Biden and Secretary Austin for having the confidence in me to forward my nomination for this position. I'm joined today by my spouse, Beth Halpern. I want to specifically thank Beth for her love and support. When I returned to government in 2010, Beth and I had been married for 6 years, and she had no idea what she was getting into. This time is different, and I'm especially grateful for her support in what we both know will be a challenging role should I be confirmed. I'd also like to acknowledge my 6-year-old son, James, who was quite excited about his dad potentially having something to do with the Space Force. James is a big Star Wars fan, and his reaction when being told about his dad's possible new job was, "Dad, there's really a Space Force?" There certainly is a Space Force, and is a critical contributor to our national security. If confirmed, I'll be honored to have a role in making it a success. I'd also like to acknowledge my grown-up sons, Scott and Eric, who have supported me throughout my career. I'm very proud of them and of their wives, Amy and Jennifer, and of my 5 grandchildren, who in alphabetical order are Caroline, Mackenzie, Madison, Holden, and Caroline and Jackson. I'd like to briefly outline for the committee my reasons for sinking one more chapter in a long career of public service, and also to lay out some of my priorities if this committee and the Senate see fit to confirm my nomination. My career in national security started with a year of ROTC, followed by attendance at West Point, all during the war in Vietnam. I spent 10 years on active duty at the height of the Cold War, including serving in West Germany, commanding an air defense unit assigned to the 4th Allied Tactical Air Force. As a civil servant, I served in engineering positions and program management oversight roles, first for missile defense, and then for all of Department of Defense tactical warfare programs. For over a decade, I worked to ensure that America had the necessary weapons to deter and defeat a peer competitor, the Soviet Union. I was still in this role during the first Gulf War, when we demonstrated to the world how much conventional military dominance the United States had achieved. I then spent about 15 years working in the defense industry before returning to the Pentagon in 2010. It was in 2010 that I discovered how much our potential adversaries had advanced their own capabilities. China had studied our success in the first Gulf War and embarked on an ambitious military modernization program with the clear goal to defeat the ability of the United States to project power near China. Russia was also modernizing its forces and had increased its emphasis on tactical nuclear weapons. We have made progress against these threats, and our adversaries should never doubt the United States, but there is much still to be done. My hope is that, if confirmed, I will be able to lead the Department of the Air Force in organizing, training, and equipping our nation's air and space forces so that the United States can continue to deter and, if necessary, fight and win against all adversaries. If confirmed, my priorities will be straightforward and mirror precisely those articulated by Secretary of Defense Austin as they apply to the Department of the Air Force: taking care of our people, mission performance, and building teams. Our military is people first and foremost. The air and space forces aren't just equipment and concepts of operation. At its heart, they are the people who operate, create, and support those things. We have to do everything we can to ensure that our people have the training, the equipment, and the support they need to do their jobs. And we have to ensure that they can do these jobs in an environment that treats everyone with dignity and respect and maximizes their potential to grow and to serve the nation. With regard to mission performance, I believe the range and severity of the threats that we face and will face, the rapid pace of technological innovation, and the need to rapidly harness that technology in new operational concepts demands a sense of urgency and a laser-like focus on getting our choices right. Finally, teamwork is critical, and it covers a lot of territory. Every member of a military family, every member of the total force, active guard and reserve, the civil servants, and the industry that supports our military and are all part of the team. America has an enormous strategic asset in our alliances and partnerships, and one of the key roles of our armed forces is to support American diplomacy. If I am confirmed, and with your help, I hope to move the Department of the Air Force forward in each of these areas. They are strongly interdependent and all are essential to our success. I look forward to your questions, and thank you again.
Thank you, Ms. Kendall. Ms. Shyu, please.
Press it one more time.
Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Senator Inhofe, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the honor to appear before you today. I would like to thank President Biden and Secretary Austin for nominating me to the position of Undersecretary of the Defense for Research and Engineering, and this committee for considering my nomination. My grandfather, a World War II era Air Force Squadron commander, had a great opportunity to come to the United States for 2 years for training. To this day, I remember him saying how much he appreciated the generosity of the Americans. My late grandmother, who passed away at the age of 103, told me, "Don't stop working and make something of yourself." Both of them were my guiding light. I came to this country at the age of 11 and a half from Taiwan, and I'm extraordinarily grateful for the tremendous opportunities that I have had in my career. In 2012, I had the honor and privilege to be confirmed as the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisition, Logistics, and Technology. In my 5 years in the Pentagon, I had the fortune to work with tremendously dedicated military and civilian personnel and with patriotic contractors across the U.S. This was an experience of a lifetime I will treasure forever. Today, I am honored to be considered for the position of Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering. The mission of furthering science, technology, and innovation across the Department of Defense could not be more important than it is today. As Secretary Austin has stated, China is the pacing threat for the U.S. military, and the challenges facing our military are both diverse and complex, ranging from sophisticated cyber attacks to supply chain risks to hypersonic missiles to bio threats. To address these challenges, the department must harness our nation's incredible innovation to stay ahead of our adversaries. Thankfully, there is no shortage of innovation. As a nation, we are able to solve incredibly tough problems by working collaboratively towards a common cause. DoD can collaborate more strongly with our allies and partners to share insights and lessons learned from our combined exercises and experiments. DoD can also work more closely with the commercial and defense industries, as well as its ecosystem of universities, government labs, federally funded research and development centers, and university-affiliated research centers. By working collaboratively, DoD can address our nation's toughest challenges. When collaborating with the commercial sector in particular, DoD should leverage the commercial sector's tremendous investment in research and development and accelerate DoD's ability to incorporate innovative commercial technologies. Inside the department, DoD should avoid duplicating private sector research and focus its investment on the innovative technologies that DoD uniquely needs, but that the commercial sector is not developing on its own. DoD should also take steps to change its internal investment strategy. Today, sustainment makes up 70% of a total weapon systems cost, with development procurement making up only 30%. DoD should strive to flip this ratio and invest more in the development of new technologies than it does in the sustainment of legacy systems. To begin changing this ratio, I believe several core principles should guide DoD's pivot towards modernization. For example, the DoD should prioritize investments in emerging technologies and capabilities, such as artificial intelligence, hypersonics, and synthetic biology. Create network systems of systems that collect and share information securely and are robust against cyber and electronic warfare threats. Reduce the military's logistic footprint by developing advanced materials and increasing fuel efficiency. Design secure, robust, and upgradable software. And widen the pipeline of STEM talent and ensure that the talent is diverse. Where shifting away from legacy platforms is challenging, DoD should look for opportunities to insert the innovative technologies by leveraging modular open architecture and standard interfaces. Going forward, DoD should shift away from its traditional linear systems development process and adopt a nimbler approach to iteratively design, test, and fix systems. By leveraging rapid prototyping, collecting user feedback from testing, incorporating that feedback into our digital redesigns, and utilizing advanced manufacturing, DoD can shorten system cycle time, field capabilities more rapidly, and deliver the military advantage that this nation needs. Flexible contracting approaches will be critical to ensure this approach, and if confirmed, I look forward to addressing these issues collectively with the Undersecretary of Defense for acquisition and sustainment. Again, collaboration across DoD, the private sectors, and with allies and partners is what is required to address the tough technical challenges that are facing our military and this nation. Should I be confirmed, it will be a tremendous honor and privilege to again serve our nation as a Department of Defense to shape the department's research and engineering, ensuring that our warfighters are the best equipped and second to none. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shyu. Ms. Blume, please.
Good morning, Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Inhofe, and distinguished members of the committee. I'm deeply honored to be here before you today as President Biden's nominee to be the Department of Defense's Director for Cost Assessment and Program Evaluation. Thank you for taking the time to consider my nomination and for all that you do for the department, its people, and our nation's security. The bipartisan cooperation this committee demonstrates in tackling the most difficult challenges in national defense provides much needed stability in our nation's defense policy and is a shining example of good governance. I would also like to thank President Biden for nominating me for this position and Secretary Austin and Deputy Secretary Hicks for their confidence in me. And many thanks also to Secretary Work for his very kind introduction. It was a privilege and a pleasure to work for him, and I learned something new from him every day, from how to lead large organizations down to the finer points of the history of military innovation. Last but not least, I'd like to thank my family, especially my parents, Carolyn and Peter, who are watching today from home in Pennsylvania. Without their unwavering love and support, I would not be here before you today. I began my career as a civil servant in the Department of Defense and have long understood and appreciated CAPE's role in supporting the department's senior leadership in making some of the toughest decisions put before them. In my time working for then Deputy Secretary of Defense Bob Work, I saw firsthand how the most senior leaders in the department rely on CAPE for independent assessments grounded in rigorous analysis. And after leaving the department, I spent 3.5 years at the Center for a New American Security, working on ideas for improving DoD's decision-making processes and mechanisms to drive innovation throughout the joint force. If confirmed, I look forward to bringing these experiences together, continuing CAPE's long and proud tradition of rigorous independent analysis, while also pursuing the reforms necessary to ensure that the U.S. military remains the world's preeminent fighting force well into the future. CAPE can serve these goals in 3 primary ways. The first is supporting the Secretary and Deputy Secretary in reviewing the future year's defense program. At its heart, this process is about making the defense strategy real, aligning resources to reshape the joint force in service of the nation's strategic objectives. The second is the responsibility to produce independent cost estimates of the department's major weapon systems, which is a mission that the Congress tasked this organization with when it created CAPE as we know it today. And underlying both of these is the heart and soul of CAPE, analysis. In addition to cost and programmatic analysis, CAPE also produces strategic and operational analysis used to inform a wide range of departmental decisions, including the development of the National Defense Strategy. And in doing so, CAPE serves the American people by serving the warfighter, ensuring that our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, guardians, and civilians are appropriately resourced to protect American interests against a rising China, a revanchist Russia, rogue states, and non-state actors. Should the Senate choose to confirm me in this role, it would be the honor of a lifetime to lead CAPE's incredibly talented and dedicated public servants in this vitally important work. Thank you very much for considering my nomination, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Blume. Under the rules of the committee, I must pose certain questions to the witnesses. Please respond appropriately. Have you adhered to applicable laws and regulations governing conflicts of interest?
Yes.
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 Have you assumed any duties or taken any actions that would appear to presume the outcome of the confirmation process?
No.
Exercising our legislative and oversight responsibilities makes it important that this committee, its subcommittees, and other appropriate committees of Congress receive testimony, briefings, reports, records, and other information from the executive branch on a timely basis. Do you agree, if confirmed, to appear and testify before this committee when requested?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you agree to provide records, documented electronic communications in a timely manner when requested by this committee, its subcommittees, or other appropriate committees of Congress and to consult with the requester regarding the basis for any good faith delay or denial in providing such records?
Yes.
Yes.
Will you ensure that your staff complies with deadlines established by this committee for the production of reports, records, and other information, including timely responding to hearing questions for the record?
Yes.
Yes.
Will you cooperate in providing witnesses and briefers in response to congressional requests?
Yes.
Yes.
Will those witnesses and briefers be protected from reprisal for their testimony or briefings?
Yes.
Thank you all very much. Now let me assume my question period and then recognize the ranking member. Thank you all for your testimony. Ms. Shyu noted the issue of sustainment costs. 70% of the course of the life cycle of these systems is made up of sustainment, only 30% procurement. She responded with some suggestions, starting with Mr. Kendall. What specific steps can you suggest that we take to control sustainment costs?
And one of the most important things, Mr. Chairman, is to invest in the earlier stages of a program in features that will result in lower sustainment costs. Now, the design decisions that are made early really reflect downstream. And often in programs, if money gets tight up front, people cut those things out. So having the discipline to do the things that are necessary up front to end up with lower sustainment costs is critical.
I presume that would require making sustainment costs one of the critical factors in developing a new system?
That's exactly right, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Blume, in CAPE, you'll have a responsibility of looking over everyone's shoulder when it comes to sustainment costs. So can you give us some ideas?
Yes, Senator Chairman. I think I share your concerns that sustainment costs are a critical issue for the department going forward. It's my understanding that CAPE already has a pretty robust effort underway to improve the department's ability to estimate sustainment costs ahead of time. I think they got a lot of help from the Congress and the last NDAA in this direction as well, some very useful new direction and authorities. And if confirmed, I look forward to continuing to advance that work.
Thank you very much. The committee has been focusing some attention on the planning, programming, budgeting, and execution process, PPBE. It's been with us since the 60s with Secretary McNamara. It was a model that was appropriate for the industrial age, but we're in a post-industrial age. And starting with Ms. Shyu, can you give us a sense of your views on reforming the PPBE process and any specific changes you would suggest?
Absolutely. I think part of the reason why there is a valley of death for technology is because a lot of the technology programs are being developed by small companies. And once it passes through a certain point, it needs to transition into a program of record. Part of the problem is to transition into a program of record, it has to be in the POM ahead of time. And the POM is a 2-year process. Therefore, unless you had the foresight 2 years ago to understand that the technology is going to be mature within 2 years' time to plan it into your POM, there's a 2-year gap. So if you put it into POM, because now you like this particular technology, you want to put it into POM, by the time you get the money to buy that technology, it's 2 years old now. So there is absolutely a gap in terms of our ability to buy the latest technology. If confirmed, I would love to be able to work internally within the department with the services and come back to Congress with some ideas how we can bridge this valley of death.
Thank you. Ms. Blume, your thoughts too.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I share Heidi's concerns that the process as it exists now is not necessarily sufficiently agile to keep pace with the current pace of technology development. However, the process also has a lot of merits in that it is very comprehensive, it's inclusive, it's transparent within the department. And so if confirmed, I would look to make adjustments to the existing process, both things that the department can do on its own and things that the department and the Congress would need to work on together to improve the agility of the process to overcome the valley of death that Heidi just described.
Thank you. Mr. Kendall, your comments, please.
Mr. Chairman, the one comment I think I'd make on that is that I think it would be very helpful if the department could manage risk over time more than it does under the current process. There's a tendency to focus on near-term requirements as opposed to long-term requirements and how risks are changing. The Chief of Staff of the Air Force, General Brown, and the Commandant of the Marine Corps recently published an op-ed on readiness. And essentially that was their point, that we need to think about readiness and what our needs will be in the future, not just what they are currently, and invest in a way which deals with those threats as they are evolving. And to some degree, we can project where the threats are going to go. But there's a tendency to focus very much on immediate needs as opposed to longer-term needs.
Thank you very much. And I thank the witnesses for the testimony. Let me recognize Senator Inhofe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kendall, it's been said that the Air Force is too small and too old to do what the nation asks it to do. And sending a fourth-generation aircraft to do a fifth-generation work is something that is not going to work. I know that the F-35 has been criticized by a lot of very prominent people, and this concerned me for some time now. The F-35, I believe, is the most capable and cost-effective fighter that's available out there today. But it's had problems, but there is no other aircraft that offers the capability and capacity of the F-35. Now, at least that's what we hear from the people who fly them. So I'd ask you for beginners here, do you agree with General Brown that the F-35 is a cornerstone of the Air Force fighter fleet for the future?
Ranking Member Randolph, the F-35 is the best tactical aircraft of its type in the world and will be so for quite some time. It's a complex, expensive weapon, unfortunately, but it is a dominant weapon when it goes up against earlier generation aircraft.
Yeah. Well, the concern I have is that the complaints still come, and they're out there. And I remember, I've been around here long enough, I remember back in 1997 when we cut the F-22s. At that time, that was the first and only fifth generation fighter we had. And we started out with, I believe it's over 700, I think, and they ended up with 187. Now, we watched this happen, and my concern right now is what kind of actions could we take to ensure that we're fielding the number of F-35s needed to fight against Russia and China. It's a different game out there altogether now. We all understand that. But we are going to have to be dealing with the numbers. And what strategy can you have to try to come down to the right numbers?
Ranking Member, we have to get to a affordable mix that meets our needs as driven by the National Defense Strategy. That's what should guide those investments. I have a long history with the F-35. It has struggled, certainly, and since I left government 4 years ago, I understand the sustainment costs are a concern. Ms. Shyu mentioned those and talked about those a little bit also. There is concern with the upgrade to the most recent version, and it's having trouble there, which I've heard about through press accounts only, and I'll have to take a look at if I'm confirmed. The key to keeping the cost down in an air fleet is getting the numbers up. There's a very strong correlation between the size of the fleet and the cost to sustain that fleet. So if there were one thing that I think will drive costs down overall, it's continue to buy. I know there's an issue with the total number that's been on the table for some years, what the requirement is. My own view at this point in time is that we're well short of that number, and that the issue that we should really be working on most is getting the cost down and keeping the procurement at a rate that makes sense.
Yeah, I know the chairman covered that, and that's a concern that we all have. Now, Heidi Shyu, do you remember McAllister, Oklahoma?
I sure do.
They remembered you too. I was in McAllister. You got to hear this now. I was in McAllister on Saturday, and I mentioned that Heidi Shyu, because I knew that they knew you, was coming back, and they said Heidi Shyu is coming back. The only uniformed officer there was all excited about that, and he wasn't even there at the time that you were. So I have to say that last Saturday was Heidi Shyu Appreciation Day in McAllister, Oklahoma. Okay?
Thank you.
All right. Let me just ask you, because you have a background that you could answer the hard question to answer, and that would be, in which specific emerging technology areas are we behind or falling behind China and Russia?
Senator Inhofe, it's certainly been a huge concern of mine to see how rapidly China has advanced its technology, especially in the area of hypersonics in space, in AI, in microelectronics. I firmly believe that we as a nation need to work collaboratively together across our entire R&E enterprise to solve our toughest challenges moving ahead. I firmly believe we can once again become a leader in these technology areas if we put a focus on disruptive technologies, and with Congress's help to protect our funding, we will be able to get there.
Well, thank you very much. I agree with that, and you commented, and so Mr. Kendall did too, on this document, and it's still worth a lot to us, right? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Inhofe. Senator Shyu, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to each of you for your willingness to be considered for these very important positions. Mr. Kendall, as I'm sure you're aware, we are making parts for the F-35 in Turkey now, and this Congress has made a statement that we should stop doing that because of Turkey's embrace of the S-400 and the potential for that to compromise our F-35. Do you have a position on that, and do you think it's a good idea for us to continue to manufacture those parts in Turkey?
Thank you, Senator Shyu. And under the current situation with Turkey, I think we should not be building F-35 parts in Turkey.
And will you, and I guess I should ask Ms. Blume this too, will you all do what you can to ensure that that ends as soon as possible?
Yes, I will.
Ms. Blume?
Yes, Senator.
Thank you. There are reports, Mr. Kendall, that renovating Space Command's current location in Colorado for long-term use rather than moving the command and authorizing new MILCON will save taxpayers' dollars and achieve full mission capability 7 years faster than moving to Huntsville, Alabama. Will you commit to this committee that you will give us cost estimates for both relocating Space Command and the potential cost to build a new facility in Huntsville?
Senator Shaheen, I understand that there's a review going on of that decision. And what I'd like to do, first of all, is to see the results of that review. And I will commit to work with you on that as soon as we get some more facts on the table. The Air Force went through a process. I think, in fact, there may be 2 reviews going on. And I'd like to have the results of those, and then we can have a discussion about the specifics at that point.
And is that something, Ms. Blume, that CAPE would take a look at the analysis of?
Senator, it's my understanding that both the Air Force and the IG, the DoD IG, are reviewing that decision. Ordinarily, CAPE would not, unless asked to for some reason by the Secretary. And if that happens, I'm happy to take a look.
Thank you. I'm just suggesting that it would be helpful for this committee to know what the analysis is and to be able to weigh in with DoD on that, since we are the authorizers of funding. Ms. Shyu, you talked a lot about the importance of research and innovation for DoD in accomplishing its mission. Right now, it administers about $2 billion a year through the Small Business Innovation Research Program and the Small Business Technology Transfer Program. As I'm sure you're aware, one of the challenges with those programs is the one that you just discussed about moving from phase 1 to phase 2 so the innovations can be commercialized. Can you talk about what you might do to help address that?
Senator, I think one of the key successes within a SBIRS program, going from phase 1 to phase 2, and then ultimately transitioning into a program of record, I'd like to share some insights and experiences and success stories. I know back when I was working in the defense industry, one of the business unit was very, very proactive, reaching out to the SBIRS small business organization to identify and create an industry day on the tough, critical challenges that they have. After having industry day with 23 little companies, they identify a list of tough technical problems. These small companies went off, thought about solutions to that, and the big prime actually collaborated with a small company to create the phase 1 and help them to transition to phase 2 and transition into the program of record. That is a great success story that I've seen that's done. So if confirmed, I would like to push that particular model to make sure that the primes are helping out the small innovative companies to ensure the more successful transition into programs.
That's great. As you're probably aware, SBIR is set to end its authorization next year in 2022. How important is it, do you think, for us to reauthorize that program and keep it going?
I think it's very important. I will plead with you to please reauthorize that.
Thank you very much. I agree. Mr. Kendall, I have just a brief amount of time left, but I would be remiss if I didn't raise the KC-46 with you, given the current concerns and the importance of trying to see if it can take on other operations despite the challenges still with the remote vision system and some other problems. Are you, I hope you will focus on integrating the KC-46 into other operations that the Air Force is trying to do, especially the aeromedical evacuation enterprise.
Thank you, Senator. I'm aware of some things that will be known with the KC-46. It's being used as a part of the movement to network Air Force's forces. It's one of the demonstrations that's coming up, I think, fairly soon. I'm not aware of other activities to integrate it, but any asset like that, we should be getting as much out of it as we can. And if I'm confirmed, I'll work to make sure that happens.
That would be great. I would encourage you to come up and see the first National Guard base that got the KC-46s in New Hampshire. We have our full component, and we're still waiting to use them. So we hope you will help us do that. Thank you.
Looking forward to doing that, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Shaheen. Senator Wicker, please.
Hope you'll visit us all over the country, Mr. Kendall. Ms. Blume, good morning to you. You wrote in 2019, U.S. military superiority is eroding vis-a-vis China. I agree with that. I think members of this committee agree with that. We need to do something about it. There's an acknowledgement on the floor of the Senate last week and this week in the form of the Endless Frontier Act, which acknowledges that our R&D is eroding vis-a-vis China, and we're attempting to address that on the floor. You also say in your statement, the first goal at CAPE is aligning resources to the needs. I will tell you, I think it is the desire of members of the Congress and members of this committee to say, tell us what the needs are, particularly with regard to meeting our national defense needs and more specifically with China. Tell us what the needs are, and let's find the resources together. But to cut back on what we're intending to do because of a lack of resources, to me, is unacceptable. Last week, media reports indicated that the budget to be released this Friday will include only 8 ships, including 1 destroyer. Now, I'm sure you're aware, Ms. Blume, that in Section 124 of last year's NDAA, this committee approved a plan to bundle LPDs 31, 32, 33 with LHA 9. This was signed into law by the President of the United States, and subsequently the money was appropriated to do just this. It's clear that the congressional intent is for DOD to procure these 4 amphibious ships in this manner. Are you able to answer yes or no? Do you support this congressionally authorized and appropriated acquisition strategy for amphibious ships?
Senator, first, let me say that I believe that a robust and highly capable and sustainable Navy is critical to U.S. national security. In terms of the multi-ship procurement, I think multi-ship procurements can do at least 2 important things. First, obviously, they can save the taxpayers some money, but they also provide badly needed stability for the defense industrial.
Right. So are you able to answer yes or no in my limited time?
Senator, I apologize for taking your time. I can't get ahead of the President and the Secretary in terms of what may be in the 22 budget request, but if confirmed, I look forward to working with you on this issue.
So you're unable to answer yes or no on that. All right. Well, that's a concern. Our recently completed Air Force Design 2030 efforts reaffirm the continued requirement for conventional amphibious warships with the addition of a new class of smaller light amphibious warships. The Commandant of the Marine Corps has written a multiple ship contracting strategy also creates resilience and confidence in our nation's shipyards, supply chains, and highly specialized workforce. Ms. Blume, do you agree or disagree with the Commandant of the Marine Corps on amphibious ships?
Senator, I agree that multi-ship procurements can provide important stability for our defense industrial base.
And they can be cost effective.
Yes, Senator.
In the Navy's annual 30-year shipbuilding plan, I want to ask you a question with regard to the Navy's battle force design. The regional combatant commanders advocate naval presence as the appropriate driver for the size of our modern Navy. Naval presence as the driver of our modern Navy. Do you agree or disagree with this?
Senator, I think there are many factors that contribute to the department's decisions about the size and the shape of the Navy. That's certainly one very important one.
Well, let me just say that is the opinion of the regional combatant commanders, the men and women who we have assigned to go out into difficult areas to enforce our national security. Let me just ask you this. In 2016, the Navy identified 355 ship as the force structure assessment. That target became U.S. policy in the FY 2018 NDAA. Do you support the congressionally mandated 355 ship fleet goal?
Senator, I certainly respect that that's the law, and if confirmed, I look forward to working with you and others in the Congress to in a transparent way to see where the analysis that the new administration will do will take us on that question.
Tell us what the needs are, and we will enact the law and get you the resources, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Wicker. Let me recognize via WebEx Senator Gillibrand, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kendall, thank you for our discussion earlier this week. I appreciate it very much. As you know, fighting sexual assault in the military is one of my foremost issues, and it requires positive command climate where survivors can feel safe and they can disclose their assault. To be frank, the military has not acquitted itself well in this regard. What is your current assessment of the Air Force command climate, and how will you improve it?
Senator, that's a difficult question. Let me begin by congratulating you on all your efforts in this area, and particularly Senator Ernst as well for her efforts to partner with you. I think you've made a lot of progress, and we're on the brink of some important change that I hope will be very beneficial in this area. Change is necessary, and hopefully we can move forward. My overall assessment throughout my career of command climates is generally positive, but there are exceptions. There are cases, and I think Fort Hood has been a recent example in the Army where investigations have revealed that there's some significant problems. So what I can commit to you is that if I am confirmed, is I will take command climate and the culture that is created within the Air Force extremely seriously in this regard. I think it is frankly at the root of the problems that we have with sexual assault and sexual harassment. And if we can't address that, we're not going to be successful at prevention.
Thank you. The IRC will be recommending that sex crimes such as sexual assault and harassment be taken out of the chain of command. The IRC did not review whether all serious crimes should also be taken out of the chain of command because it was not within their purview. The bill that I authored with Senator Ernst and have 63 other co-sponsors on, the Military Justice Improvement and Increasing Prevention Act, will take all serious crimes and all serious non-military crimes out of the chain of command. And there are many reasons for doing so, but one of the important ones that recent studies have shown is that there are significant racial disparities in the military justice system, including that Black service members are up to twice as likely to be charged with a crime as white service members. Does that concern you, and do you commit to working with me on that problem?
It concerns me very much, and I absolutely do commit to working with you on that. There's a report that came out of the Air Force just last fall, that highlighted the disparities in a number of areas, including the ones that you talked about. And it doesn't get at root causes for that, but I think we have to do that. And I'd be delighted to work with you on that. It's important to the health of the force and its mission readiness and its capabilities that we get at this. You and I spoke just yesterday, about the additional coverage in your bill of additional crimes and so on. And I haven't had a chance to look into that. You made some persuasive arguments, but I would really like to hear from the Air Force leadership as well on that before having a final opinion on that.
Thank you. We also talked about one of New York's finest assets, which is the 109th Airlift Wing, which plays a very important role in the Arctic mission and will continue to do so given Russia's interest in the Arctic. However, the LC-130H aircraft flown by the 109th are aging and will soon need to be replaced. Given their importance to our Arctic strategy, do you have a view on replacing these aircraft?
Senator Gillibrand, you introduced me that issue yesterday, and I did a little bit of research as a result of that. You have some unique assets up there, and I think they're very important to the Arctic. I've not had a chance to assess their age or how much life they have left on them, but I can commit to you that if confirmed, I will do so and try to take the appropriate action.
Thank you. For Ms. Shyu and Mrs. Shyu and Mrs. Blume, the last time Eric Schmidt testified in our committee, he spoke about improving innovation with DoD software. He recommended changing the mindset from thinking of software programs as a weapon system to think of them as a consumable. Since the competition cycle is so quick, programs are obsolete before they hit the force. Do you agree with that assessment?
Senator Gillibrand, I absolutely do agree with it. We have to, so one of the key areas I would like to focus on is software. Software is absolutely ubiquitous in all of our weapon systems, and we have to think about how we can develop software continuously and test it continuously. So this way we can insert the latest capabilities as quickly as possible. So I absolutely do agree with you.
Thank you. Ms. Blume?
Yes, Senator, I agree as well. If confirmed, I really look forward to digging into understanding how we need to think about software differently from other kinds of development and procurement programs that the department does.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Gillibrand. Now let me recognize via WebEx Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Kendall, I appreciate the experience with our nation's nuclear enterprise that you bring to this role from your previous service in government, and in particular, your understanding of the tight timelines many of our nuclear modernizations programs face, most importantly, GBSD and the LRSO. And I was happy to see your statement in response to the committee's advanced policy questions that, in your view, quote, the nuclear enterprise is by far the most important and significant responsibility of the Secretary of the Air Force, end quote. I think that's absolutely right. Nuclear deterrence is the most important mission of the Department of Defense. And as the service responsible for 2 of the 3 legs of the triad, the success of this mission depends heavily on the Air Force. I know that if confirmed, you're going to be thoroughly reviewing the nuclear modernization programs. I hope that review will also include the Air Force elements of our nuclear command, control, and communications networks. I'm particularly concerned about the Air Force's plan to recapitalize the E4B. This is an issue that has been under constant study for well over a decade, but the challenges of maintaining an outdated airframe are only getting harder as time passes. I think it's vital that the Air Force expeditiously move forward and this issue not be studied indefinitely. So I hope that that's something that you will take a close look at.
I can commit to do so, Senator. When I left office a few years ago, the E4B issue was looming on the horizon, but had not really confronted us yet. But I'm aware of it, and the replacements for those aircraft and maintaining the nuclear command and control system is an essential part of our nuclear deterrent. And I will definitely be taking a close look at that.
Thank you very much. And also, Secretary Kendall, as we discussed on our phone call last week, Offutt Air Force Base continues to rebuild after the 2019 floods. And I commend the Air Force's efforts to date, but the work is not over. Do I have your commitment to work with me as a partner to continue the Offutt rebuild as well as to finish the Offutt runway project so that this crucial element of the Air Force continues to contribute to the fight now and also well into the future?
Senator, I haven't had a chance to look at the exact status of that project, but Offutt as a strategic headquarters is extremely important, and the assets there are extremely important. So I would absolutely commit to work with you on that.
Thank you. The erosion of our military's technological advantage is something that you've been talking about for a long time, Secretary. I remember in 2014, my second year in the Senate, on the Emerging Threats and Capabilities Subcommittee, you briefed us on that. There's a lot more attention that's being paid to this challenge now, but at that time, that was not a widely appreciated issue. Understanding that you've been out of government for a while, can you frame the problem as you see it and share some of your thoughts about how, if confirmed as a service secretary, you can help address that?
Thank you, Senator. If there's one reason I'd like to come back into government and hopefully will be confirmed, it's to address that problem. As I mentioned in my opening statement, I became aware of the Chinese modernization programs and how successful they had been in 2010. And that briefing that you mentioned, I remember it very well. It was a highly classified briefing, and we walked through some of the specific threats. I hope to address that. I know that progress has been made. There's been a lot of additional attention focused on this in the last few years. The National Defense Strategy that the ranking member mentioned takes us in that direction. And I think that there's general consensus now that China is the pacing threat, as I think Ms. Shyu mentioned. And I'm looking forward to working on that. That's that is the reason perhaps that I'm interested in coming back into government.
Very good, thank you. Secretary Shyu, this committee has made a number of changes, including creating the position for which you were nominated in order to improve its ability to deliver innovative solutions to the warfighter. But one thing Congress cannot legislate is the culture of the workforce, which witnesses have testified is generally risk averse. Can you talk about the importance of culture and risk tolerance in particular when it comes to innovation? And do you believe the department and the services need to be perhaps more tolerant of risk?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. I think there's a very different culture in the technology community versus your standard acquisition community. In the technology community, typically there is a lot more risk, and you push the edge of the envelope to create innovation. But in the program management side, you're judged and evaluated, and your career depends upon how well you execute based on performance, cost, and schedule. Therefore, by that definition, they're going to be risk averse. Any perceived technical risk incorporating their program, they're going to be averse to it because it impact the schedule, the cost, thereby their career.
What happens to innovation then?
Well, that's the problem. So they want to see the technology being very mature. So one of the key things that we need to do when I get into my position, if confirmed, is to help to bridge this valley of death that we talked about a little earlier. Make sure the technology we test out in labs are tested in a relevant setting, relevant environment, so the program manager will feel more comfortable adopting that technology. And I think one of the key things we ought to take a look at is after we develop a technology, even a prototype, get the user to test it. Get feedback from the user, incorporate it into the redesign. The Israelis do that. They're very, very fast in developing a prototype, getting into the hands of a user to get feedback as to what needs to be modified, then redesign that. Based upon my experience with RoboTeam, which is a small robotics company in Tel Aviv, that's exactly what they did. They're able to do 3 generations of prototypes in 1 year. And that's the kind of speed we need.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. Let me recognize Senator Blumenthal, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for your public service, and thank you for what you will do in the future. Ms. Shyu, I was very interested and impressed by your goal of flipping the percentages of sustainment versus new technology, 70, 30%. I noted, however, that there's no reference in the concepts that you set forth in flipping that ratio and investing more in new technologies. There's no mention of climate change, in environmental sustainability. I wonder if you have any thoughts beyond fuel efficiency. I recognize that you do mention fuel efficiency, in what the military can do in driving the effort against climate change forward, because the military has been such a powerful force in innovation and creativity, whether it's the internet or medical devices. And I think there's a real opportunity for the Pentagon to drive innovation here.
Senator Blumenthal, I probably didn't have enough time to answer in detail, but I would like to take this moment to kind of explain to you some of my thoughts. I've had the honor and privilege to work with a number of small companies who have developed advanced materials that's lighter, that's stronger, and has ability to reduce fuel efficiency. We need to incorporate these type of materials into our design. Logistically, it'll be a lot easier to move. That's one example. I've also had the opportunity to work with some small company that's developed engines that will shrink the size down to 1/3 of the current size. That will significantly change the equation as well as the sustaining of these engines. So there is a lot of innovation that's out there. I also saw a 6-person company that's developed any type of fuel as input, and the output is a DC plug, right? Those are the type of creative, innovative technologies we need to nurture. And they're struggling trying to figure out who to talk to in the DoD. So if confirmed, I would like to help these type of company to advance their technology maturity so we can deliver unprecedented capabilities. And it will absolutely help the issue of climate change because you're reducing the logistics burden.
It's a matter not only of cost savings, but also obviously national security.
Absolutely.
As the Secretary of Defense has told this committee very persuasively. And I would hope that you'll work with us not only in receiving applications, but proactively reaching out to companies like the ones that you mentioned that are in this area. I've found all too often there are Connecticut companies, for example, I suspect my colleagues share this experience, that have tried to find the entry point in this system, which seems from the outside, just like the Pentagon building, a huge, implacable construct without a welcoming entry point. So I would hope that you would do proactively what you've suggested here.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. I plan to talk to a number of the small companies, to meet with them, to understand the impediments that they have and work to resolve those impediments. You're absolutely 100% right. This is a giant fortress. They have no idea where the door is.
Thank you. Secretary Kendall, you and I had a good discussion about the C-130 planes. And I indicated, and I think you agreed, that these planes can play an essential role for our Air National Guard, which have been so important. Our Air National Guard has been at the tip of the spear, not only in our wars abroad, but also in responding to natural disasters here at home. And I have learned that the C-130H propeller upgrade program has been delayed, possibly delayed again. There's funding for 26 additional propeller kits and spares provided in the last year's FY21 Defense Appropriations Bill that have not been executed. The contract expires on July 6th unless there is additional funding put in the contract. I know I'm hitting you with this issue somewhat cold, but I would like your commitment that you'll come back to me by July 6th, if possible. And I would hope that you would be confirmed. I hope all three of you will be confirmed by then with an explanation as to what can be done to make sure that the modernization of our C-130 fleet is accomplished, because it is so important. It's a workhorse aircraft, as you well know, performs a vital function.
Senator, I can commit to that. The C-130 is a very valuable workhorse, as you say. It's a very versatile aircraft. Does an awful lot of things in support of a lot of missions. I'm not aware in detail of the specific issue you have with the propellers, but I'll confirm. If confirmed, I will commit to take a look at that and get back to you on it.
Thank you. I'll just close by saying I share the sentiments of a number of my colleagues that the F-35 should be advanced, that the Air Force should be very assertive in asking in this next budget for the numbers of aircraft that will drive down the cost per copy of each of these F-35 aircraft. And I hope that we will discuss it further. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Blume. So let me recognize via WebEx Senator Cotton, please.
For appearing before the committee today. Congratulations on your nomination. Mr. Kendall, I want to direct most of my questions towards you. First, an issue that has long been a concern of mine, on which I've worked with Senator King, is the Air Force shortage of pilots. This is a perennial concern. It drives up operations tempos for our personnel while decreasing their quality of life, causing some of them to leave the force altogether. What are your thoughts on this recurrent issue and how we can address what a previous service chief has referred to as a crisis?
Sir, I'm aware that there's a shortfall. It's on the order of 2,000 pilots, I believe, and it is an issue that I would certainly address as a high priority if confirmed. There have been some issues, I think, with planning as we've moved through the COVID experience and the airlines have shut down. That's given the Air Force a temporary break, but they may have overplayed that. So it's something I want to look at carefully. There are a lot of possibilities for increasing the flow of pilots into the pipeline. Minority pilots in particular are relatively short numbers in the Air Force, and I think we can do something about that. So I'd be happy to work with you on that issue. I agree with you, it's very important.
Thank you. One point I would make, and this is something we learned in our sensing sessions with pilots, is that a common solution is putting more money into pilot compensation. And look, our pilots are never going to turn down bonuses to stay in the Air Force, and we should recognize their service. But at root, we can't compete against the salaries that private airlines or aviation companies are going to offer pilots. We need to recognize, in my opinion, that these young men and women join the Air Force to fly high-performance aircraft in defense of our nation. And the more we can do to get more pilots in so they're flying more and doing other routine administrative duties less, the more we can contribute to their quality of life. The second question, Mr. Kendall, the Air Force now has a fleet with an average age of 30 years. What are your thoughts on how to improve acquisitions so that we can ensure the Air Force is prepared to fulfill national security requirements with technologically relevant and reliable fleet of aircraft?
Senator, the age of the aircraft is an issue. I think the number I heard was 28 years, roughly 30 years. There are two things you can do about that problem. You can get rid of the old airplanes, you can buy new airplanes. And I think we need to take a look at both of those, quite frankly. I mentioned earlier how we manage risk over time in the department. And one of the things that I think we should look at is getting rid of some near-term capability in order to have more longer-term capability. But that's a trade-off that I would be interested in, certainly if I was confirmed.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I am broadly supportive of what the Air Force has proposed over the last couple of years in terms of modernization, and some of that does involve divesting in older aircraft. To be clear, not every old aircraft needs to be divested. Some very old aircraft are still performing vital missions and performing them effectively and safely. But as you say, some of these older aircraft are probably going to be we're going to need to divest them so we can invest more in cutting edge technology. One final question, Mr. Kendall. Last December, there was a very concerning report released by the National Commission on Military Aviation Safety. It states that we've lost 224 lives, 186 aircraft, and almost 12 billion to training accidents in just 7 years. What are your thoughts on what the Air Force can do to prevent such accidents and deaths in the future?
Senator, I have not seen that report, but that sounds unacceptable to me, quite frankly. We overall, in the military in the U.S., have had a very good record for flying and mishaps. But and I know it's a source of constant attention in the Air Force. A lot of focus is placed on that from my previous experience. But I will take a look at that report, and I will see what kind of corrective action is necessary and can be implemented if confirmed.
Yeah, I think it would be well worth your time to review that. I have my concerns that one possibility is that we're shortening training timelines in part because of the shortage we discussed earlier, and that we're relying too much on augmented reality or other simulator training in place of actual flight time in the aircraft for our junior aviators. My time has nearly expired. Thank you all again for your appearance. Mr. Kendall, thank you for your answers. I look forward to supporting your nomination.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cotton. I must also thank Senator Hirono for yielding her time at this moment to Senator King. Senator King, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator Hirono. Ms. Blume, on the assumption that you are confirmed, I can make that assumption, you can't. I would appreciate it if one of your first tasks might be an updated assessment of the sustainment cost of the F-35. The figures that I've seen, which may be outdated, are 40 hours of maintenance for every hour of operation, anticipated only 250 hours of operation a year, $36,000 an hour of cost of flying the airplane. We need to understand where that is now. It may be that we've made some progress on that, but I would appreciate it if you could commit to giving us a comprehensive update of that issue, and also some thinking about how to do something about it.
Yes, Senator, I share your concerns about F-35 sustainment, and if confirmed, I look forward to digging into that and providing you an update.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ms. Shyu, we had a wonderful conversation. It strikes me that one of the things that hasn't been mentioned very much today that I think is a strategic gap is both the defense and offense in terms of hypersonic weapons. And I view that as an important part of acquisition over the next 5 to 10 years. We have platforms that are very vulnerable to hypersonic weapons, and we need to figure out how to both defend them and also to maintain or develop our own offensive capability in order to serve as a deterrent. This is one area where we don't really have a deterrent. Is that something that you intend to follow up on?
Senator, absolutely. There's a lot of stuff you're talking about is in the classified arena. So once I get briefed on the latest state of where we are in this area, I'll be happy to come back and share the results with you.
Thank you. I think, and maybe that in classified setting we can discuss it more thoroughly, but as I say, I think it's a strategic gap right now. And this is a question, I think, for you, perhaps also for Mr. Kendall. In my view, we should never buy another military system without also buying the IP. We have to be able to print our own parts and not be dependent upon the OEM for parts. And I understand that's one of the sustainment costs is parts and availability of parts. So I hope that all contracts in the future for an acquisition, whether it's a tank or an airplane or a coffee dispenser, we will also buy the IP so that we will have the ability to do our own development of parts. I foresee a day where every ship and every aircraft hangar has a 3D printer that will be capable of supplying many of the parts. Is that something you will see to? Ms. Shyu?
For me, yes. Actually, I agree with you. The other thing that I know the services are all working towards is having a modular open architecture with standard interfaces. If we implement that across our programs, even if you don't have a specific part, you could potentially develop another part that has the same form, fit, and function as well. So there are two prongs to this I would like to take a look at.
I appreciate that. And Mr. Kendall, good to see you again. Welcome, and delighted that you're willing to take on this challenge. They often say that September 11th was a failure of imagination on the part of this country, that we didn't imagine what could happen. We're now imagining cyber in a serious way. And in discussing, for example, the upgrade of the modernization of the nuclear triad, in my view, it's really a nuclear quad. It's submarines, air and missiles, and communications and command and control. Give me your brief views on the significance of cyber. I believe the next major attack on this country will not be landing craft or missiles, it will be cyber, and we are not adequately prepared.
Senator King, first of all, I want to compliment you on your work on the Solarium Commission. I think it was a very good body of work and very helpful. And I also want to recollect our time together on a submarine under the ice in the Arctic. It was a great experience with you. You're right. Cyber is a ubiquitous problem. It is a potential Achilles heel in any number of places in our overall economic, social, military enterprise, including potentially in the nuclear command and control area. And it is an area that, as we look at nuclear modernization, we have to look at very, very seriously. The time I left government, I thought we had a reasonable posture there, but I think it's well worth taking a look at, and continuous diligence in that area is what is actually required, because the threats never stop. They keep coming at you.
Not only do the threats never stop, the wake-up calls never stop, and we're not thoroughly awake. So I hope you will make this a high priority in your work in the Air Force, because a jet fighter is not useful if its command and control and navigational system is knocked out in the first moment of a conflict.
Completely agree, Senator. Or it's a logistics support system.
Correct.
And there are a lot of ways to, a lot of attack vectors are possible against our assets, as you're well aware.
Thank you. Thank you all for your dedication and willingness to come back to work for the American people. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator King. Let me recognize Senator Rounds, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kendall, I'd like to follow up where Senator King is leaving off. The FY20 NDAA Section 1657 directed each military department secretary to appoint an independent principal cyber advisor to act as the principal advisor to the secretary concerned on all cyber matters affecting that department. With the surge in high-profile cyber attacks against the United States, the need for breaking down cyber silos is needed now more than ever. If confirmed, I would like your commitment that you will conduct an in-depth review of the implementation of the principal cyber advisor position, and within 60 days of assuming that office, to get back to this committee with your findings. Would you do that, sir?
Yes, Senator, I will. You're correct in that there are silos of activity in cyber that are not often as well connected as they should be. And the overall posture of our institutions needs to be better understood at an integrated aggregate level to make sure we're putting our resources where they belong. And I would see that as an important role of this principal cyber advisor.
Thank you. Ms. Shyu and Ms. Blume, there's been a couple of questions asked now about how quickly we can acquire new products and also to integrate them into a supply system. Ms. Shyu, you just, from Senator King, there was just a discussion about how once we purchase an asset, today when it comes to either replacing or fixing, we don't necessarily have the parts and pieces, and therefore we go back to the original supplier. You indicated that you would like to have the ability to, because of the open architecture that we're building in, to be able to plug and play other products that are similar in nature. But the third part to that component is that we don't necessarily purchase the intellectual property rights that go with that to begin with. And I think that's a critical part of that discussion as well. Would you agree?
Yes, sir, I do agree.
Thank you. And Ms. Blume, when Ms. Shyu was talking about the need to be able to basically integrate a more quickly moving process, one in which we can investigate, find, determine, test in the laboratory, and then bring back out and implement in the field. When we do that, that sometimes means that we're really good at doing workarounds, meaning if we've got a supply system in place and it's not moving fast enough, we create a new office which accelerates the purchasing, and yet we leave the other one in place, in part because our rules require that we do so. If Ms. Shyu is correct that we need to find a way to more quickly acquire, and I happen to agree with her, I think the time has come that we as a government recognize that the old way of doing business simply does not work anymore. Folks in your position that actually come back in and look and analyze afterwards, you're going to find that we're moving around systems that are in place today. Are you prepared to work with those individuals to not only find the workaround, but to find the appropriate way so that we don't have to work around it anymore, but rather to create the system in which the existing infrastructure actually works efficiently in the first place, so we don't need the workaround?
Senator, yes, I do commit to working on that if confirmed. I think that CAPE's role in this space is twofold. The first is going to be making sure that there is sufficient agility in the programming process in order to put money where it needs to be in a timely manner. And the second is making sure that the analysts, both in CAPE and across the department, have access to good data sets they need to do that kind of analysis much quicker, in order to make sure that decisions that we're making are supported and are the right ones, but quickly.
Ms. Shyu, I agree with you that we have to move more quickly. Whose job is it to overhaul the system to see that it gets done?
I think it's a senior leader's role within the Pentagon. It is working from R&E to A&S, also collaboratively working, providing the information data to the tester, DOT&E, working collaboratively with CAPE as well, and all the service secretaries. So,
do you include yourself as one of those senior leaders?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay. So in terms of accountability, we're talking about the folks that are in front of us right now being accountable for seeing that this gets done. Ms. Blume, would you consider yourself to be one of those senior leaders to see that this gets done as well?
If confirmed, yes, sir.
Mr. Kendall?
Absolutely, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Rounds, and once again, let me thank Senator Rona for her graciousness and recognize her.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask the following two preliminary questions of all nominees who come before any of the committees on which I sit. First question, since you became a legal adult, have any of you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No.
No.
Have any of you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement related to this kind of conduct?
No.
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 For Ms. Shyu, I am very glad that President Biden nominated such a highly qualified individual like yourself, and if confirmed, you will be the highest ranking civilian Asian American at the Department of Defense. And I think we all recognize that diversity is a welcome thing in all of our services. So hearing your testimony, it is very clear that you work very closely with a lot of small businesses. I'm really glad that you recognize the importance of reauthorizing SBIR program. So one of the concerns we have is there are a lot of innovations being done by small businesses. In fact, there's recognition that most innovation comes from small businesses. There are a lot of them out there, and you did get asked some questions about how are these innovative small businesses to access your office. And you indicated that you understand that they need to know where the door is, and that you'll be making concerted efforts to make sure that they see the door, and then they can go through the door and work with somebody in your office to propose their ideas. You also mentioned that that Israel is a country that can develop a prototype, and then to be able to have that prototype used in the field so that changes can be made that makes sense to the people in the field. So when you raise Israel as an example, are you saying that we don't do enough of this kind of utilization in the field of prototypes?
Ma'am, what I have noticed is they, being a much smaller country, they're much more agile. Okay. The user will go to a company and say, I need a particular capability. For example, unmanned ground vehicle. I need to send the ground vehicle into a long tunnel. And can you develop something like that? So in a period of 4 months, they're able to develop a prototype and then give it to the user. So go ahead and use it and give me some feedback, right? So the user used it and provided the feedback back to the developer. And the developer are able to modify the design per the request by the user.
So I am running out of time. So that's the role that you play then, to contact or to interface with the users and then to translate their needs to the people who will develop the prototype to meet the needs. So that's, in a big outfit like our DoD, that is a critical role that you can play with regard to supporting our small businesses. I do have a question for Ms. Blume. In 2019, the Missile Defense Review identified the Homeland Defense Radar Hawaii, HDRH, as a requirement for detecting and discriminating against inbound missile threats from an increasingly capable North Korea. Congress appropriated $133 million for fiscal year 2021 to keep this radar development on track. Both Admiral Davidson and General Lacamero have testified before this committee in the last 2 months that HDRH would be an important part of the region's layered missile defense system to protect Hawaii and the lower 48 from long-range North Korean missiles. I'm concerned that the new administration may cut the radar's funding in this year's budget based on a CAPE assessment. So I understand that CAPE had gone through an assessment of this radar program and had okayed it in prior years. So was that an earlier assessment that gave the go-ahead to HDRH Hawaii wrong? And are you now providing some new assessment that changes the environment and we no longer need this radar for Hawaii?
Senator, I'm not familiar with the original assessment that you mentioned, and I'm not aware of work that CAPE is presently doing on this question.
Should you be confirmed, this is definitely an area of interest to all of the delegation from Hawaii, I can tell you that. So I'd really appreciate your paying attention, or looking at this issue. It is really important. I'm sure you're aware that we had a scare not too long ago when people of Hawaii thought there actually was a missile headed to Hawaii, and there was an extreme fright of all of the people in Hawaii. So, if there's some other system, a new system that can protect Hawaii, then I would like to be apprised of it. Otherwise, I also would like to know why CAPE is planning to change its assessment of the need for this system. Thank you.
Yes, Senator, I agree completely that defending Hawaii is absolutely imperative, and if confirmed, I look forward to working with you on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Roner. Let me recognize Senator Tillis, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here. Mr. Kendall, thank you for being generous with your time last week. Ms. Blume, Senator Sullivan's already expressed disappointment that I don't have my 680-page proposal for the next generation handgun. I honestly tried to find it, but it's somewhere in a box from my prior office. But I use that as an example when you're talking about reviewing programs and really trying to stratify them based on risk and cost. I use it as an example. There's no excuse for 10 years to define the next generation handgun and 5 to 10 years to deploy it. I know you've got a lot of forward-looking work that you're going to be required to do in CAPE, but I hope we can go back and do some after actions on some of these programs to really learn from it and make sure we don't repeat that mistake again. And I'd love to know if there's anybody in the DoD that thought that was the right kind of time and effort to define the next generation handgun. I'll bring my prop back when you come back for an oversight hearing. But Ms. Blume and Mr. Kendall, I wanted to ask a question that may swim into both of you all's lanes. It has to do with the KC-46 and the KC-10. We're retiring KC-10s, but it seems to me that the KC-46 still has problems and isn't really able to complete all the mission set that it was designed to do. I know the Air Force has come back and said, well, it's providing some of it, but Ms. Blume, do you have any current experience or insights into this program? And any opinions as to whether or not the KC-10 can be retired, given the deficiencies in the KC-46 program?
Senator, I'm certainly familiar with the public reporting on this issue and perhaps just ever so slightly deeper than that. If confirmed, I would look forward to working with both the Air Force and Transcom in order to make sure that the tanker force is sufficient to need.
Yeah, and Mr. Kendall, I don't want, as I mentioned in our call, I don't want to artificially extend the life of the KC-10. I want the best capabilities in play, but it just seems to me that we really have to take a look at the readiness of KC-46s that are in operation but not fully operational, and weigh that and measure that against the KC-10's capabilities to fill the gaps. I spoke with you about it last week. I just wanted your commitment to take a look at it. It seems like it could be a readiness issue, but I'm happy to see a report that definitively answers the question if the current the current posture is the correct posture. And I think I got your commitment from that to look at that last week, and it does seem like it swims a little bit into CAPE's lane as well.
Yes, Senator, I will take a look at that and I will get back to you. I'm like Ms. Blume, I know from press reports, the general situation out there, but I've not had any chance to look at the detailed trade-offs between keeping the 10s and the 46.
Yeah, I would just
and
like
I would
to
commit
see
to do that.
A drill down and report back. Ms. Shyu, I think a lot of the ratios, you talk about flipping a ratio in your opening statement. Can't remember the exact subject matter. I feel the same way about the DoD's leading role in the past in R&D. I mean, we were the technology lead. Now those ratios have shifted more into the civilian sector. I think that's a reality of the pace and scale of technology today. But I'm particularly concerned with making the federal government and the DoD an attractive place for digital cyber experts to come and work, and possibly even moving into and out of the DoD to keep their skills fresh. But do you share a view that we've got to come up with a different way to onboard, retain, and fully exploit the talent that we're lacking right now in the DoD?
Yes, sir. I absolutely do agree with you. I would like to share with you something in my experience that has worked very well in terms of attracting new grads. PEO Stride down in Florida has been very, very effective in terms of attracting brand new talent. They have an internship program in which they bring, during the summer, 6 weeks, bring interns in to work with them to show what the Army does in the simulation and modeling world. And what happens is, because they're so closely integrated, they have an opportunity to see what the Army does. They have virtually 99.9% retention rate, okay? As soon as they graduate, they enter the PEO and they stay there. There's only one loss over 126 people. That's because that person's husband got transferred. But that's exactly the kind of things we need to do to attract young talent, because young talent love to be able to see the work that they're doing is for a common cause. right? It contributes to something greater than themselves. I think this is kind of model we need to do across the board.
Thank you all. Congratulations on your nominations. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Tillis. Let me recognize via WebEx Senator Warren, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to each of you on your nominations. Mr. Kendall, I want to spend some time talking about military housing and climate change this morning. But before I do that, I want to briefly ask you about the strategic basing process. This is the formal process the Air Force uses to decide where to station new aircraft, like the F-35 or the KC-46 that you've been talking about. The Air Force has gone to admirable lengths to ensure that when it's choosing installations for these aircraft, issues like the quality of education available near a base and licensure reciprocity are a big part of the consideration. And this is important because the quality of schools available for their children and the ability of spouses to obtain jobs and sustain careers are critical issues that impact service members' quality of life. Excuse me. So, Mr. Kendall, can you commit to ensuring that the quality of education and licensing reciprocity are indeed factored into the strategic basing process going forward?
Thank you, Senator Warren. I have lived in military housing. It's been a while, but I know exactly what that's like and what some of the considerations are. And I actually applaud what the Air Force has done, as I understand, relatively recently, to take into account quality of life for families and issues like licensing and the support that the community gives to people. So the answer to your question is absolutely. The process that you described is a several-step process. It gets to a small number of candidates, and then it compares them over several factors, cost, mission support, but also quality of life, and it's really the ability of the community to support a military family. So I think that's all very important and all should be taken into account.
Good. Well, one thing that's not formally considered during part of the process is the effects of climate change and extreme weather. A 2019 Pentagon analysis found that of all the services, the Air Force's base infrastructure is most at risk for climate change threats such as recurrent flooding, drought, desertification, wildfires, thawing permafrost. Do you think it's worth making that another factor in the strategic basing decision-making process?
I'm not aware of the extent to which it is or isn't at the moment, but it should be a consideration, absolutely. Climate change implications affect costs, they affect mission performance and other things. So it should be included in my view as one of the things that's looked at.
That's terrific. Thank you. On the subject of climate change, there is no way to address the climate crisis without confronting DoD's role as the largest consumer of fossil fuel on the planet. Will you commit to using all the tools and authorities at your disposal to make the Air Force more climate resilient and to reduce its carbon footprint whenever possible?
Yes, Senator, it's an all of the above type of problem, and there are a number of things that can be done. The Air Force is impacted by geopolitical changes even that affect the threats that we face, but it's also affected by extreme weather events that affect our bases. The Air Force, among the DoD, which itself, as you've pointed out before, is a very large consumer of fossil fuels, is the highest consumer because of the large fleet of aircraft that the Air Force operates. So there are a number of things that can be done there. Ms. Shyu mentioned lighter weight materials is one thing. I'm aware of some technology programs on propulsion that would reduce the consumption of fuel substantially and also increase operational capability. So it's an all of the above problem that needs to be addressed on a great many fronts simultaneously.
Good. And if I can, I want to get in a question about military housing. We've all heard the stories from military families about the deplorable conditions of on-base privatized housing. The companies that were hired by DoD escaped accountability by fudging their numbers and sweeping complaints under the rug. My office still hears from military spouses that the problem is not getting any better and that landlords are not following the laws that Congress passed that are designed to protect the military tenants. So let me ask, if confirmed, will you commit to using all the tools available to hold landlords and private companies accountable to make sure that they build and maintain quality housing for our service members and ensure that they are not profiting off substandard housing?
Senator, again, I've lived in military housing. I know how important it is to families to have quality housing, and it's a fundamental obligation of someone who would be confirmed potentially in a position like the Secretary of the Air Force. So the short answer to your question is yes. But what we need to do is have sound contracts. We need to enforce those contracts and ensure that people get the quality housing that they deserve.
You bet. Thank you. I plan to hold you and the other service secretaries to these commitments. You know, military housing and climate change are issues of military readiness. But for too long, our services have paid only lip service to this reality. So it's time for that to change, and I look forward to working with you on it to make this happen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Warren. Let me now recognize Senator Sullivan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to congratulate all the nominees. Mr. Kendall, appreciated our meeting, very constructive. Ms. Shyu, I really enjoyed our meeting, and I think you're going to do a great job in this position. Your experience, patriotism, it's what this position is going to need. So congratulations. And Ms. Blume, I look forward to meeting with you soon. Sorry, we did not get a chance to meet before this hearing. So, Mr. Kendall, I want to start with you. The father of the U.S. Air Force, Billy Mitchell, in an armed services hearing, I think in the 1930s, stated, quote, "This place," I'm not going to mention the place, you're going to mention the place, that's a quiz for you, "is the most strategic place in the world. Any nation that fully controls this place controls the world." What was this place in Billy Mitchell, the father of the Air Force's statement to the Congress?
Senator, I have a suspicion that it might be Alaska.
Yeah, it was Alaska. I'm glad as the secretary, my colleagues should know this too, but I ask this question about once a week. In all seriousness, I do want to get a commitment from all three of our witnesses to come to Alaska, see the most strategic place in the world, according to the father of the U.S. Air Force, soon in your tenure. Can I get that commitment from all three of you?
Yes, sir.
Each nominee, are
Yes,
you guys
Senator.
nodding your head, yes?
Looking forward to it.
Good, Ms. Blume? Okay, great. Let me ask, we haven't talked a lot about budget, and I am concerned. The Biden administration is having double-digit increases to many federal agency budgets, but it looks as if they will be requesting a decline, if you adjust it for inflation, of the budget for DOD. I hope that's not the case, but that's the rumor. We're going to know soon. The National Defense Strategy Commission report, previous two Senate-confirmed Sec.Ofs and the previous and current chairman of the Joint Chiefs all stated and agreed with the commission of the National Defense Strategy Commission of a 3 to 5% annual real growth to the defense budget. Can I get your commitment? I know you have to do what the president puts out. You got to support that. But before that, you're going to have to fight for a budget. I think it will be a very disappointing and problematic issue for our nation's national defense if we're increasing the budget of the EPA and Department of Interior by 15% and DOD gets slashed. Can I get your commitment, all three of you, to support and fight for that 3 to 5% annual real growth that the National Defense Strategy Commission said was needed for our national defense? Mr. Kendall.
Senator, rather than try to pick a number, what I can commit to you is that I will fight for the budgets that's necessary to fulfill the national defense strategy, whatever that may be. If it's 3%, yes. If it's 5%, if it's 10%, I will try to get the money that is needed by the Department of the Air Force, if I'm confirmed, so that the Air Force can support combatant commanders as they need to carry out that strategy.
Ms. Shyu.
I will definitely commit to fighting for the resources in research and engineering to make sure that we have the most innovative technologies that I can transition into our warfighters so that we're second to none.
Ms. Blume.
Senator, I also commit to advocating for the resources that I believe the department needs.
So I have just two final quick questions. One, and again, Ms. Blume, we'll talk about this. So I follow our special operations forces a lot. It seems like CAPE on a very regular basis looks at these, particularly focuses on MARSOC, makes MARSOC try to justify its existence year after year. Can I get your commitment to fully understand what the SOCOM enterprises do, including MARSOC, and how effective they have been once you're confirmed? It seems like an exercise that gets tiring. You know, all these forces do a really good job, but for some reason, CAPE seems to have a focus on the relevance of that unit, and I think it's kind of a focus that is misplaced.
Senator, I'm not aware of what work Kate may have done on that specific question, but if confirmed, I do commit to fully understanding what's happening in the Special Operations Enterprise.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Kendall, Alaska will be home to 100 fifth-generation fighters, over 100 fifth-generation fighters, almost by the end of this year, combat-coded F-22s, F-35s. The former Secretary of Defense testified from this committee, if you combine 100 fifth-gen fighters with a very serious, strong tanker fleet, that will give the United States extreme strategic reach, particularly with our great power competitors. The Secretary of Defense, during his confirmation, committed to me to work with this committee and me to review the Air Force's bed down of the KC-46. They have moved it from an OCONUS strategy to a CONUS-based posture that I think is more budget-driven than strategy-driven. Can I get your commitment to work with me and this committee on that very important issue that the Secretary of Defense has already committed to?
Short answer is yes, Senator. I've not had a chance to look at the bed-down approach that the Air Force is taking to the KC-46, but I would certainly do so, and we'd be happy to work with you on that.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Sullivan. And now let me recognize Senator Rosen via WebEx.
Thank you, Chairman Reed, of course, Ranking Member Inhofe for holding this hearing. Really appreciate the nominees. Thank you for testifying. Mr. Kendall for meeting with me yesterday. I'd like to, at this time, take one moment to express my condolences to the family and the friends of the pilot that was killed yesterday, providing necessary adversary air support near Nellis Air Force Base, and to the North Las Vegas and Nellis communities. My thoughts are always with our brave airmen and airwomen, everyone who served, and so we mourn this loss. But now I'd like to move on. Mr. Kendall, I'd like to talk a little bit about nuclear waste and the Nevada Test and Training Range, because of the Department of Energy's proposed routes to transport and permanently dispose of high-level nuclear waste at Yucca Mountain would potentially border the Air Force's Nevada Test and Training Range, NTTR, and Creech Air Force Base. Many other installations that we have across Nevada and across the country that are located in 44 states. Nuclear waste may be transported through 44 states in order to come to Yucca Mountain. There's long been Air Force opposition to the Yucca Mountain project due to concerns that the project would impact the ability of Nellis to carry out its air combat training mission at NTTR, the crown jewel of the Air Force. As you know, NTTR provides the largest air and ground military training space in the contiguous U.S. without interference from commercial aircraft. And it's home to 75% of all stateside Air Force live munitions. So in 2017, Air Force Secretary Heather Wilson addressed major concerns with the Yucca Mountain project, citing how it could directly impact military readiness. I'm going to quote her here. She says, quote, "There is no route across the range that would not impact testing and training," unquote. Secretary Wilson's concerns are consistent with those expressed to the House Armed Services Committee in 2023 by Air Force Secretary James Roche. So, Mr. Kendall, do you share the concerns from the former secretaries of the Air Force that transporting thousands and thousands of metric tons of nuclear waste around or through Nevada's test and training range to Yucca Mountain would be detrimental to testing and evaluation of weapon systems, tactics development, advanced air combat training, and our overall military readiness?
Well, Senator Rosen, first of all, let me join you in offering condolences for the loss that occurred yesterday. Our training advantage in the United States, particularly for our air crews, is an important advantage we have over our adversaries. But unfortunately, there are times when that training comes at a very high price. And that's what apparently happened yesterday. With regard to Yucca Mountain, I have not had a chance to look at that issue. We talked about it in your office. I can only commit to you at this point that if confirmed, I would do so, and that I would try to understand the mission impacts that you highlighted and raise issues with that if I think that's appropriate.
Thank you. I'd like to move a little bit now on to land withdrawal. In FY21, the NDAA renewed the Air Force existing withdrawal of almost 3 million acres of public lands for the next 25 years. It included a provision that Senator Cortez Masto and I inserted that mandates an intergovernmental executive committee between the Air Force and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to help improve the administration of and resolve conflicts on jointly managed lands. We have to support military modernization, keep up with current and emerging threats, but we also have to maintain Nevada's natural and cultural resources. This committee is one way to do so. And so as you take on this challenge and you pursue modernization of the range, can you commit to exchanging information, collaborating with local, state, and tribal governments on any proposals to withdraw Nevada's public lands, and work with me and the rest of the Nevada delegation on any future land requests? And also, will you commit to setting up the Intergovernmental Executive Committee and getting its first meeting scheduled, as the Navy has already done in Fallon, Nevada?
Senator, with regard to the second part of your question, I'd have to go look into that. But in general, I think I would support that and try to make it happen expeditiously. With regard to the first part, absolutely. Transparency is central to a process like this. There are a lot of affected stakeholders, and having a clear, understandable, and transparent process is, I think, the key to success. These issues can be very, very difficult and very tough on all concerned, but they need to resolve expeditiously so we can get to the right place. And doing that effectively requires a very open, transparent process.
And I look forward to, my time is up, but I will look forward to meeting with you because the Intergovernmental Executive Committee is now mandated. The Navy has already done it. We can follow the template that they've done up in Northern Nevada, so you can set one up for the Air Force in Southern Nevada. I look forward to working with you and your team on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator. Same here.
Thank you, Senator Rosen. Let me recognize Senator Scott, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to thank each of you for your willingness to serve. Communist China is clearly a despicable government. Whether it's stealing our jobs, which hurt our American families, stealing our technology, which puts our military and our business community at a disadvantage, putting 1 million Uyghurs in prison for their religion, harvesting organs involuntarily, or taking away the basic rights of Hong Kong citizens. It's just despicable what they're doing. On top of that, they're trying to build a military that will clearly either be able to defeat us or clearly push us out of the Pacific Rim. So, Mr. Kendall, can you talk about your priorities in implementing the national defense strategy as it relates to dealing with Communist China?
Well, if confirmed, the mission of the Air Force that I would be responsible for is to make sure that we equip, train, and support our combatant commanders in order for them to carry out the national defense strategy for the Secretary and the President. The specific problem that I've been concerned about for some time is China's investments in capabilities that are intended to defeat the U.S.'s ability to project power in that region. And the Air Force, of course, is a key contributor to that, both the Air Force and the Space Force within the Department of the Air Force. I would be working very, very hard as a high priority to ensure that we make the right decisions about future operational concepts, first of all, and about future equipment that supports those operational concepts. And then that we move as quickly as possible to realize those things so that they're in the hands of our combatant commanders.
Thank you. Where do you think we stand today with our ability to defend our interest in the Pacific, along with the interest of our allies with regard to Communist China? Do you believe we're in a position that we can?
I don't believe anyone should doubt either our resolve or our capability. The Secretary of Defense, Austin, has talked about agile deterrence and a way to respond in more ways than the enemy may expect and across different fronts. I think that's a sound concept, and I would support that. And I think, if confirmed, I would work to facilitate the Air Force's role in that.
Do you believe with the defense budget that the president's proposed that that you will be able to continue to, if you're confirmed, to do your job?
Senator, I'm convinced that President Biden will submit a budget that he thinks is necessary to meet the security obligations of the United States. And there will be trade-offs within that will be difficult. I think that will be true at any level of the budget. But I believe that the funding that I understand the President will request in 22 is adequate to meet the national defense strategy.
Ms. Shyu, can you talk a little bit about in procurement? What is there an opportunity to use off-the-shelf products that would reduce our costs significantly and give us more capability?
Absolutely. There's a lot of opportunities to do exactly what you're talking about. I'll give you an example. One thing that I'm very proud that the Army's doing is buying Sky.Of small UAVs. They're basically, you can flip it into a size of a little pack. Okay, it's commercial. They sell to the commercial industry, but the Army is buying, I think, 6,000 of them in production right now. So, right on point, right? Instead of redesigning it for a specific purpose, utilize what you can buy off the shelf.
Do you believe that we need to be careful about continuing to fund legacy programs rather than using off-the-shelf products?
I think
do you think there'll be a lot of a pressure to just keep using the existing companies because we have relationships and they have great lobbyists rather than what's the best for our military?
I think we need to look at the capabilities that the new product brings and trade it off versus a legacy, right? So it's a cost trade as well as a performance trade.
Yeah. Have you had any time to look at our ability of our military to talk to each other and just our communication systems and whether they're compatible enough to allow the transfer of information?
Sir, that's one of the areas I would like to do a deep dive in, especially the fully networked C3. See how well we are able to communicate within a service, across the service, and across different domains.
Mr. Kendall, did you find that a problem when you served, the ability to share information among all the combatants and in different branches of service?
I'm sorry, Senator, I didn't catch the question.
Did you ever have any experience with the inability to share information rapidly in the military?
Sharing information is a fundamental thing that the military is working on right now. A lot of effort is going into, sometimes it's called the military Internet of Things. Is that what you're referring to? Yeah, that's one of the very prominent areas of investment and modernization that the services are talking about right now. The Air Force version of that is something called ABMS, Advanced Battle Management System. I have not had the chance to look at the details of that. It'd be a very high concern to me to make sure that that program is on track and getting where it needs to be, if confirmed.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Let me recognize Senator Peters, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to each of our nominees, congratulations on your nomination and your willingness to serve our country. Mr. Kendall, Selfridge Air National Guard Base in Harrison Township, Michigan, is in the running to host an F-16 and F-35 FMS mission. This would consist of F-16s and F-35s from the Republic of Singapore and also F-35s from Finland, Poland, and Switzerland. And I know you and I had a chance to speak at length about this mission in a phone call earlier. And my Michigan colleagues and I have also written to Acting Secretary Roth earlier this year and to former Secretary Barrett last fall. And as we discussed, Selfridge is a finalist for this basing decision, and its location clearly exceeds all of the mission requirements. Michigan hosts the largest contiguous joint overland service range airspace complex east of the Mississippi River. Selfridge has extensive flying operations, hosting both the A-10 as well as the KC-135. And as we discussed from a cost-effective basis, which I know is important to you, Selfridge would require no significant infrastructure upgrades in order to complete this mission. The runway length, the number of aircraft shelters, ramp space are all adequate as they are right now. And in addition, the folks on the ground in Macomb County have been enthusiastic hosts of this base. for over 100 years. Not many air bases can say that. They've been around for over 100 years and having community support to handle this mission and others. So my question to you is, can I have your commitment that if you are confirmed prior to a decision being made, that you will ensure that it's fair, it's transparent, and that the Air Force will make its judgment solely upon the merits of the installation?
Senator, if I'm confirmed, I will see to it that all Air Force basing decisions are fair, transparent, and that people are properly informed of the results of them.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think you'll see the facts very clearly as I've outlined them here, and look forward to working with you forward. My next question for you, Mr. Kendall, is that Michigan communities have a number of PFAS contaminated sites, including the former Wordsmith and K.I. Sawyer Air Force Base. And what they're dealing with, these communities are dealing with, is a challenge, and they certainly deserve greater transparency and communication about the ongoing remediation efforts that the Air Force is engaged in. They hosted the Air Force for many years, and it's simply wrong that this process has been slow walked over the years. The pace for PFAS cleanup on the ground is simply too slow for anybody and is unacceptable. And my question for you is, if confirmed, will you ensure that the Air Force conducts meaningful and substantive engagement with communities affected by PFAS?
Yes, Senator, I will. My understanding is there's some regulatory things that need to happen for us to move forward that aren't under the responsibility of the Air Force. But in any event, I will make that commitment to you. We will do everything we can to address this problem.
And you will commit to pursuing expedited remediation of these sites?
If confirmed, I will make that a priority. It will be something that would have to trade off with other priorities in the budget, of course. But the Air Force would have obligations, I believe, as we move forward. And I would do everything I could to make sure the Air Force met those obligations.
Well, I appreciate that. And we would like to welcome you to Michigan, be at Selfridge and perhaps these other bases as well, as you get, if confirmed. I know you're going to want to get out and see these facilities, and we would look forward to having an opportunity to host you in Michigan.
Thank you, Senator.
Ms. Shyu, you mentioned earlier your appreciation of the speed in which the Israelis were able to develop and field new technologies. As part of the fiscal year 21 NDAA, I led an effort to create a U.S.-Israel Operations Technology Working Group so that the U.S. conducts cooperative research and development with tech-savvy countries like Israel. My question to you is, if confirmed, will you work with my office to build upon this effort and also work to expand our innovation cooperation with other allies? And maybe related to that, as you mentioned, the Israelis were particularly good. Are there other allies that we should be forming a closer relationship in order to expedite research and development and innovation?
Absolutely. I think that it's absolutely key to do that. I look forward to working with your office to increase the collaboration with our ally countries so we can share the knowledge and the lessons learned.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Peters. Senator Tuberville.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here today, and thanks for your service. First, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Kendall, Miss Blume, for standing by the date of the decision to put Space Command in Huntsville. My colleagues seem to continue to fight that for some reason. The Air Force analysis showed the location at Redstone saves taxpayers millions of dollars, which we all look forward to. I know you do, Ms. Blume. And that co-locating Space Command with NASA, Blue Origin, and ULA makes strategic sense. I'm proud that Secretary of Defense Austin is supportive of the Air Force analysis, and it's my hope that the decision, which is good for both national security and the taxpayer, remain apolitical. Mr. Kendall, you established a procurement strategy for the National Security Space Launch Phase 2 program and the retirement of Atlas V. In Alabama, we're proud to help the nation transition from Russian-made engines to American-made engines, and that was insightful for our national security. How should DoD boost our industrial base and secure the United States access to space?
Thank you, Senator. And we talked yesterday in your office. I lived in Huntsville for some time, and I'm very familiar with the capabilities that are there. The The thing that we did in the previous administration, in which I served, the Obama administration, was to reintroduce competition for space launch. And that's had a significant impact on cost in a very positive way. It's also led to the opportunity to modernize our space launch capabilities. A lot depends in the future on what happens in the commercial markets, but one thing I think that the department should do, and if confirmed, I would work to see that this happens, is to take advantage of the synergy with the commercial market for space launch to minimize the cost to the Air Force and Space Force for their future launches.
Thank you. Ms. Blume, do you think you think we have problems how we share data with Congress in your job coming up, and how do you think we can make it better?
Senator, I think that the way in which the department shares data with Congress is sometimes a little bit outdated in terms of what modern data collection, tracking, accessibility tools can do for us. And if confirmed, I do look forward to working with the Congress to figure out ways that we can improve that flow of communication.
Thank you, Ms. Shyu. I don't know if you've been to Huntsville, Alabama. Have you been to Huntsville?
Many times.
Yeah, thank you. As you well know, we do a lot of research there. We have over 1,000 defense contractors and of course NASA and missile defense, and we want to invite you to come. We talked a little bit earlier about hypersonic missiles. I've seen the work on those, and of course we're behind the 8 ball, and we need to catch up with that. And I'd just like to end here. We'll probably run a little bit long on time, but invite all 3 of you to come to Huntsville. We have the Army Command, Material Command in Huntsville. Ms. Blume, spend a lot of money, but we ship it everywhere, and we're proud of what we have there, and all over Alabama in terms of our 7 military bases. So thanks for being here today, and look forward to working with you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Shyu. Okay, first of all, we're going to stand by for a few minutes because we have 2 votes that are taking place right now, and we're all switching back and forth. And we'll recognize Senator Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just ran down from that vote. It's so good to see everybody here today. I just want to first start off by openly acknowledging the nominees sitting before us, Mr. Kendall, Ms. Shyu, and Ms. Blume. Congratulations. You would all bring significant experience and expertise to these important roles, and I appreciate each and your willingness to continuing to serve. Ms. Shyu, if confirmed, you'll be the highest ranking Asian American Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander civilian in the Department of Defense. I have fought for better representation for the community in this administration, so I was so pleased to see your nomination. If confirmed, I'm sure that you'll make significant contributions to the Department of Defense. I believe truly that our military is stronger when it draws on the full richness of our population for talent, ideas, and leadership. Mr. Kendall, it is so good to see you again, and so good to see you nominated for this role. In fact, I have read your reports and my classwork on acquisition reform, and I'm just so pleased that you have been nominated to lead our Air Force. The Air Force does fulfill a critical slate of missions for the Joint Force and the nation. This is especially true with the Air Force Reserve and the Air National Guard, where wings that fly the C-130, the workhorse of the Air Force, handle both missions overseas and critical domestic missions, such as airlift support, aeromedical missions, weather reconnaissance, firefighting support for the U.S. Forest Service, and natural disaster relief. The C-130 fleet also sustains the training and operational readiness of the Army National Guard units, as well as the airborne units of the active Army. The reserve components have seen unprecedented activity in the last few years, and our air wings are no exception. The Air National Guard C-130 fleet has provided 68% of hurricane support and 42% of civil unrest support since FY18. These domestic operations are only projected to grow in coming years. In short, our nation relies on our reserve component C-130 fleet, composed of hardworking units like the 182nd Air Wing in Peoria. You knew I was going to throw Illinois in here somewhere, right? Yet the Air Force still plans on divesting multiple C-130 squadrons from the reserve components in the next few years. While I understand that the Air Force has difficult decisions to make in how it manages its budget, I've heard from my TAC about how concerned he is that the Illinois Air National Guard will not be able to fulfill its duties to Illinois and to the country if there are further C-130 divestments without replacement platforms. I know other members of this committee have heard the same from their governors and their TAGs. If confirmed, Mr. Kendall, will you commit to working with the governors and the TAGs of states with Reserve and National Guard C-130 wings to ensure that they are able to fulfill their domestic missions, and that the Air Force's divestment plans do not eliminate the C-130 capacity that our nation has come to rely on without at least replacing it with some other flying platform?
Senator, I'm very aware of the versatility and the utility and the very wide range of missions that C-130 can perform. It's a remarkable platform. It's served us well for a very long time. I absolutely can commit to taking all those things into consideration and any trade-offs we have to make in terms of what fleet we can sustain. And I would agree certainly to work with the CAGs and with the states on that to make sure their needs are met.
Thank you. I'm also concerned about our air mobility capacity. In fact, I sat down with the Air Force's A8 last month to receive a classified update on the plans for that C-130 fleet. And in the course of the brief, we discussed the fact that the Air Force had not created a plan for the future of air mobility beyond the C-130. While the C-130 continues to play a critical role in our military and will for years, technological advances mean that we need to be thinking about the long-term future of air mobility. This is especially true when it comes to providing air mobility in a contested logistic environment in the Indo-Pacific region, where we need to be prepared to face long distances and advanced adversary targeting and sensing capabilities. If confirmed, Mr. Kendall, will you commit to rapidly delivering a plan for the modernization of the Air Force's air mobility platforms that factors in both overseas and domestic missions?
In general, yes, Senator. I'm not sure what activities are underway. That should be something that's going to be reviewed as we build the FY23 budget, and hopefully we'll be able to provide a plan in conjunction with that. If confirmed, that's some of the things I would look at, the overall mobility posture and how the Air Force, the Department of the Air Force supports that.
Thank you. It's clear to me that without this important enabler, we don't have a combat credible deterrent in the Indo-Pacific, and I hope that you share my concern and sense of urgency when it comes to making sure that we are going to be effective in the Indo-Pacific region.
I absolutely do.
Thank you. Again, it's so good to see you there, and I look forward to working with you. And since we last spoke, I now am chair of the Air Land Subcommittee, so yay, we get to work together a lot more.
I look forward to that as well, Senator. And did you get your PhD? I'm curious.
I got it on a different topic. I actually got it on the use of electronic medical records, but I am still working on that, on the acquisition reform. And we should talk about Future Vertical Lift as a model and how we operationalize the lessons learned from Future Vertical Lift for other DoD acquisition programs.
It's a great topic. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And you're out of time, Mr. Chairman. You've been very generous.
Thank you very much, Senator Duckworth. Now let me recognize Senator Hawley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to all the witnesses for being here. Congratulations on your nominations. Mr. Kendall, let me start with you. Enjoyed our conversation last week. We talked about the fact that Missouri is the proud home of the 139th Airlift Wing, and we talked about the fact that the 139th can use the C-130s to get to places that few other units can. Let me ask you how you see this unique capability allowing the 139th and Air National Guard units like it to support distributed operations in the years ahead.
Senator, we talked earlier about how important C-130 is and how versatile a platform it is. It serves many missions and many functions, and I've historically been a big supporter of that program. I haven't looked at the specific unit that you're talking about and what its capabilities are, but I'm sure it's an important part of that overall mix.
Very good. Thank you for that. Ms. Blume, you wrote in 2019 that China is investing in capabilities that are designed not to defeat the U.S. military, but to hold it at bay long enough for Beijing to achieve their objectives before the U.S. can respond effectively. And you went on to write that the resulting fait accompli would present U.S. policymakers with an appetizing dilemma: risk escalation through a massive counterattack against a nuclear-armed state, or accept an armed attack on a U.S. ally or partner and the consequent devaluation of U.S. security guarantees. Can you just tell me from an analytic perspective, why would it be so difficult for the U.S. to dislodge Chinese forces from Taiwan in particular if we fail to deny a fait accompli at the outset?
Senator, I think the fundamental crux of that challenge is that the U.S. in that context will be fighting an away game. It's much more difficult to project power over the vast distances that exist in the Western Pacific than it would be for China to defend its position once it's achieved a lodgment.
Given that, would you agree that it's important that we maintain forces forward in the first island chain in order to effectively be postured to deny a fait accompli?
Yes, Senator.
Very good. Mr. Kendall, along those same lines, you said last week that if China initiated an offensive against Taiwan, they would try to make it impossible for us to intervene before they'd accomplish their objectives, which is a classic fait accompli in the way that Ms. Blume has described. The Air Force Chief of Staff General Brown said recently that the Air Force needs to be postured forward in order to blunt a Chinese fait accompli against Taiwan. Do you agree with that assessment?
Yes, Senator, I do.
Ms. Blume, let me come back to you. I've said for a while now the department needs to take a harder look at burden sharing, not only to ensure that other nations don't take advantage of our own spending and defense, but also for the simple reason that the United States military can't do everything. I mean, we can't possibly defend every scenario in every theater. If you're confirmed, can you give us a sense of how you'll ensure that CAPE takes full account of the capabilities that our allies and partners can bring to bear and make sure that those variables are fully incorporated into any relevant analytic effort?
Senator, I agree completely that the U.S.'s allies and partners are critical strategic advantage for us in this environment. And if confirmed, I would look forward to, CAPE is an analytic organization incorporating allied and partnered capability in the analysis that the organization produces across the board.
Very good. I think that's really important. I'm really glad to hear you say that. Let me just, Ms. Blume, going back to China, if I could, there is a tension between the requirements for shoring up deterrence in the Western Pacific over the next 5 to 7 years and transforming the force so that we can sustain deterrence over the medium and long term. My question is, from an analytic standpoint, under what conditions should the department accept some level of duplication, maybe even at extra cost, so that we can strengthen deterrence in the near term while bridging to solutions that will allow us to maintain deterrence in the medium and the long term?
Senator, I think the short answer is that the department needs to do both. Of course, the devil is in the details. And I think that it is really important to look at each of these mission areas on a case-by-case basis to understand what the risks are and tee that up for the Secretary and the Deputy Secretary to make judgments about what risks are acceptable and what risks are not.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Kendall, finally, General Goldfein testified last year that the Air Force required 145 B-21s in order to achieve both its conventional and nuclear missions at moderate risk to the force. You and I talked a little bit about this on the phone. Give us your assessment of the number of B-21s you think the Air Force requires.
So I think that number is a reasonable number at this point. We're a long way from achieving that, and requirements may change over time. But I think as far as a target and a basis to manage the program, it's reasonable right now.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Howley. Let me recognize Senator Kelly, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all our witnesses for being here today. I want to start with Mr. Kendall. We spoke last week about your views on the future of the Air Force. For the past 4 decades, the A-10 Warthog has been an invaluable close air support asset to America's troops on the ground. Its capabilities are unmatched, and its cost effectiveness can't be beaten. As a former test pilot and combat pilot, and having flown close air support missions myself, I don't see how the F-35 or the F-16 is going to be effective in this mission. Flying low under cloud cover, delivering ordnance on an enemy position while visually identifying where our guys on the ground are and ensuring we keep them safe, being able to turn around the aircraft very quickly and getting it back into the fight. Mr. Kendall, how would you assess the ability of other fighter aircraft to meet these requirements and conduct close air support missions?
Well, Senator, as we discussed, the A-10 is a very special airplane. It was designed specifically for the close air support mission. I'm a former Army officer. I've talked to a lot of Army officers, particularly infantrymen, and if they're going to get some help in the air, they want it to be an A-10. It's a formidable aircraft at that mission, particularly at suppressing enemy fire. My son was an infantryman in Iraq, and I'm quite sure that if he needed some support, he would have preferred to see the A-10 show up. So I'm a proponent of the airplane just because of my background. There are hard trades that have to be made, and I think there's a question about how much inventory can be kept in the A-10. A lot of them have been re-winged to extend their life, but they provide a unique capability, and I would be reluctant to see them come out of the inventory entirely.
Well, thank you. And I think it's important that we remember that this isn't like hypothetical. The consequences of getting this wrong, of being less effective in this mission, real consequences. I mean, it's the difference of life and death for our soldiers and our special operators on the ground. So you've gotten feedback, I have as well, from our troops on the ground with respect to the A-10, and I've flown a airplane that was a great all-weather attack airplane. It did not do the CAS mission very well, so I appreciate your comments here. And I think it's critical to our national security to make sure that we sustain the entirety of the current fleet of this very cost-effective and combat-proven aircraft for the U.S. Air Force. And look forward to working with you on this issue.
Same here, Senator.
I've got a couple more minutes. Ms. Shyu, good to speak with you again. Enjoyed our conversation last week. I know from our past discussions that you share my view of the imperative of bringing advanced semiconductor production capabilities back to our country. Hard to believe that today that U.S. scientists and industry have to look to China to test advanced capabilities in semiconductors. And it's clear that investing in U.S. semiconductor research and fabrication capability today is going to lead to dividends for our national security in the long term. That's why I'm working with colleagues on both sides of the aisle to make sure we fund and support these efforts. Critical element of this network, of this work, is the National Network for Microelectronics R&D, and it was authorized in last year's defense bill. And the network would simultaneously leverage the advanced research capabilities at universities across the country, and it would support American innovation and alleviate supply chain security concerns in today's market. So Ms. Shyu, can you speak to why this reshoring is so critical to our security? And if confirmed, can you commit to working with me to implement the microelectronics network?
Senator Kelly, I absolutely believe that reshoring our microelectronics is critical. There are so many microelectronics components across all of our weapon systems, as well as in the commercial industry. So I'm fully supporting the Congress's effort in terms of finding funding to reshore this capability. I'll be more than happy to work with your office once I get a chance to dive into a little bit more details of the microelectronics initiative. I'll be happy to come back and chat with you.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to reiterate, I believe that these investments are critical to our long-term security, and it's important that we support, rapid implementation in this year's NDAA. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Kelly. Now let me recognize via WebEx Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think somebody wasn't looking at my camera being on, and I got skipped a little bit ago. So thank you for coming back to me. Mr. Kendall, enjoyed our conversation, and of course we had a good discussion about Arnold engineering and the fact that we have wind tunnels and engine test cells and arc heaters and space testing chambers all there at Arnold, but crumbling infrastructure is a problem, and we are hopeful that you are going to make maintenance a priority. So given the considerable risk that our infrastructure poses to the Air Force test mission, and that affects our combat power, are you confident that our testing facilities are sufficiently well maintained and modern to meet the high demands of our priority testing items like hypersonics?
Senator, I haven't had a chance to review the current status of those facilities. In my previous position in the department, I was responsible for test facilities, and I consider that a very important and a high priority, that those facilities enable us to move technology forward. And hypersonics that you mentioned in particular was an area in which I supported additional investments. And once you have the facilities, of course, you have to take care of them. If you don't, then it becomes very cost effective to try to maintain them, use them, or cause them to recover. So I am in general very supportive of that type of installations. Now, I have not had a chance to look at the current state of those facilities and what's happened over the last few years to places like Arnold, but I can commit to you that if I'm confirmed, I will do so.
And of course, we know that in order to compete with Beijing and Moscow, that hypersonic capability is going to be important. So what do you understand to be the national security risk of not modernizing these testing facilities, and what roles do you see for preventative maintenance and to mitigate some of these risks?
You need to take care of the things that you have so that they can function properly and be used to do the test that's necessary. So both modernization of those facilities and acquiring new, more capable facilities that can do things that existing ones can't, as well as taking care of the things you already have. There is obviously some prioritization that has to happen in all of that. And you have to look carefully at what your expectations are for the future. But it is certainly a high priority.
Thank you. Ms. Shyu, thank you for the time last week, and so enjoyed the conversation about new and innovative partnerships. And we discussed that in the Pathfinder program that Vanderbilt and University of Tennessee are participating in. So my question to you is, how would you seek to more quickly transition emerging technologies through leveraging some of these public-private partnerships and also the capabilities that we find in our national labs?
Senator Blackburn, it was great chatting with you last week. I absolutely believe the fact that the university is working so closely with the users to develop critical technologies that would have strategic implications, that is absolutely the right way to go. Because it's the users who understand where the shortfalls are, and collaborating with the universities as well as small companies is the right step moving forward. What I would want to do, if confirmed, is making sure that the capability that's developed has a transition path into programs to get it into the hands of warfighters. So that will be a key focus of mine.
Okay, I appreciate that, and I think that finding that pathway so that you have that participation by the warfighters in developing both hardware, software, applications. There was discussion from Senator King earlier about 3D printing and looking at those capabilities. And Mr. Kendall, our Guard in Tennessee has some really top-level talent when it comes to cyberspace, remotely piloted vehicles, the drones, and the 118th ISR group, along with 5 other Air National Guard targeting units, provided robust support to the active component Air Force targeting enterprise to ensure continuity of the mission during COVID. And what is your view on the role of the MQ-9 Reaper in great power competition?
Senator, the MQ-9 Reaper's been a very valuable program. It served us incredibly well. We bought an awful lot of them, for the campaigns in Iraq and Afghanistan for the war on terror, and they're used other places around the world as well. So the concern people have about that now is its utility in a high threat environment, in a non-permissive environment, it's called. So I think we'd have to look at what we could do to sustain that program in that environment. I know that some things have been talked about, including adding more countermeasures to the aircraft, and providing some standoff capability. And I think those are well worth looking at. We've made a big investment in that platform, and it would be a shame to not be able to utilize it against more sophisticated threats.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Blackburn. Let me thank the panel for your attendance here today, but also your willingness to serve the nation once again after your distinguished service previously. You've demonstrated the thoughtfulness and the integrity and the commitment that is essential to be a part of the Department of Defense. I look forward to your confirmations. With that, let me adjourn this hearing.